This week on Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News, living single, more American adults are going at it alone by choice.
I can do what I want and I can make choices and it only affects me.
So what does that mean for our economies, both big and small?
In every group, unmarried adults felt less financially secure than married ones.
Today, a special discussion recorded in front of an audience about single living and personal finance.
So a couple pays the same amount for a hotel room as I do, even though the value is twice as much for them.
Welcome to Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. I'm Denver7's Micah Smith.
And I'm Colorado Public Radio's Nathan Fernando Frescas. Each week, in a partnership between Denver7 and CPR, we'll have a real talk about issues impacting underrepresented people across Colorado and amplifying voices you may not always hear.
Nathan, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Who do you think pays more for groceries, a single person or a person who has a partner?
Well, I think a person who has a partner.
Okay. Single people pay more for groceries, nearly $1,000 extra a year on average.
No way.
I know, because I'm a single person. Well, that's just one of a lot of ways that living single affects people's personal economies, but groceries are just the start. Collectively, it's sometimes called the singles tax. So it's the idea that being single costs more for reasons having to do with the market or with public policy.
All right. There can be differences in workplace benefits. You can't put your best friend on your health insurance, for example.
You cannot. And there can be a financial disadvantage of being single when you're preparing for retirement.
And that's what we're talking about today, the social norms around being single and the economics of it.
We're going to hear parts of a panel discussion on this topic that I did with the public radio program Marketplace. We had a packed theater in Denver, the Holiday Theater, full of single people and allies, and I was on stage as one of the panelists.
Because this issue is personal for you.
It is, so you'll hear me get a little bit vulnerable here.
Now, the event was conceived by another very successful woman in journalism who is single, Kimberly Adams. She's one of the hosts of Marketplace and the podcast Make Me Smart. Before she got on stage at the Holiday Theater, she told me that single living is on the rise. From a time when just 1 in 10 Americans used to live single, it's at least 3 times that now.
That shift is only going to increase because as the generations age, we're seeing bigger and bigger chunks of people who are single, and not just single because they're divorced or widowed, but single because they never got married. And younger generations, myself included, many of us are aging single or are planning to age single. And it has a big impact on what your personal economy looks like.
First up on stage, Kimberly talked with CU Boulder behavioral economist Peter McGraw, who is a bachelor and wrote the book Solo Building, A Remarkable Life of Your Own. And we've actually had Peter on the show before.
Yeah.
So, first of all, what is the difference between living single and living the solo lifestyle as you describe it?
Sure, I think one of the things that I think will resonate with a lot of the singles in the room is that they don't want to be defined by their relationship status. And especially this notion that you are somehow less than until you can find the one. And so what I found interacting with a wide array of singles, whether they want to find the one or they are very happy single by choice, is they have 3 characteristics. And I think we can play like a little quiz here with you and the audience.
Okay,
you folks want to do this? All
okay.
Right. So the first and the most important characteristic of a solo, and after I say you can applause if you agree with this, is that they are not half waiting for a whole.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Definitely not.
Yes.
Okay.
They're wholehearted. They see themselves as a complete person, which I think has this really wonderful effect that should they meet someone, should they want to meet someone, they're adding that person to their life rather than trying to fill a hole. And I think that the better we can change this cultural narrative, the healthier our relationships can be.
Okay.
Second thing is that we
can get applause for that.
Amen, right?
Amen.
Secondly, is a solo is a good parent to themselves.
What do you mean by that?
That is that they seek to solve their own problems first. And then again, should they invite someone into their life, they can do this in an interdependent way rather than a codependent way. The last thing, and I think this one is something that I'm starting to see, and that is that a solo doesn't just accept the script. They question the norms. Question the norms about relationships. Why is it that I have to follow this one type of relationship in order to so-called be happy, have a meaningful life, etc.? And they question that, and they wonder, well, maybe I don't have to have that style of relationship. It maybe is the case that the most important person in my life is a platonic partner, for example, a la the Golden Girls, right? And so solos tend to question the norms more generally, whether it be about relationships or about life more generally, and thus opens up possibilities to, as I like to say, live remarkably.
You are an economist. Let's put on the economist hat. Give us a sense of the single population in the U.S. economy, how big it is, how it's evolved over time, and why.
It's enormous, and it's kind of shocking that very few people are paying attention to this. This is such a wonderful forum. It's something that you don't see very often. So half of American adults are single. That's 128 million. This is a shocking number. Compared to 1960, 90% of adults would get married. And they did so on average by age 21. But to understand that statistic, that 90% of adults in 1960 would go on to get married, explains a lot of the challenges that singles face. Because it was seen as this very temporary thing. Eventually you're gonna switch over.
Right.
And half the workforce is single. 25% of millennials are projected by Pew Center to never marry. And don't get me started on Gen Z. Like, you know,
They're like
about
marriage, why?
Yes, exactly. Right. And so this is fundamentally not just shifting cultural norms, but it's going to change the economy. And when businesses start to pay attention to this, they're going to start creating products and services for singles. When governments start paying attention to this, they're going to start needing to change zoning laws to accommodate a difference in housing. So I think one of the most shocking things is 28% of households in the United States are one person. It's the most common form of household. The nuclear family is now number 3.
Wow.
Yes. And this is obviously creating a lot of tension because we're still seeing lots of like suburban homes being made rather than high rise. I mean, round of applause if you like your apartment living. Love my apartment living. Right, because you get to share common spaces with your fellow residents, and you get to have a nice small footprint. And if you like to set the temperature exactly the way you want it, you know, it's quite nice.
You know, you're talking about how society was sort of set up for couples because the single was supposed to be temporary, but that meant that so many of our laws are designed for people not just to be in partnership, but married.
Yes.
So can you talk a bit about how policy actually shapes what the financial lives of single people looks like?
Indeed, yeah. So, you know, we live in a world built for two, and it's really pervasive, and it's easy just to sort of accept it because that's the way it is, right? So, for example, you have two people who pay into Social Security. One of them is married, and one of them is not. They've done the same work, they've paid in the same amount. The married person has an additional benefit. And I'm not able to designate a special benefit to someone for when I die, for example. There's over 1,000 laws in the United States that disadvantage singles, that married people have access to. We know that it can be different because it is different in other places. So in Scandinavia, which happens to be among the happiest places in the world and feature the most singles, they have family of one policies. So policies are given at the individual level and not at the couple level, and it opens up choice, right? I'm not anti-marriage. I want people to choose a path one way or another, not because they have to, but because they want to.
Fascinating, Micah. All right, coming up, more about what singles here in Denver are experiencing when it comes to their personal economies.
We're hearing a conversation recorded at the Holiday Theater in Denver. So after the break, I'll join the stage This is Real Talk with Denver 7 and CPR News.
Welcome back to Real Talk with Denver 7 and CPR News. I'm Colorado Public Radio's Nathan Fernando Frescas.
And I'm Denver 7's Micah Smith. I recently joined a few other people on stage in Denver to talk about living single and what it means for our economy.
The portion of American adults who are single is going up. It's triple what it was half a century ago.
So on stage, I joined fellow Denverite Andrea Dunphy, as well as CU Boulder behavioral economist Peter McGraw and Kimberly Adams from the public radio program Marketplace. Kimberly asked us all, what's the biggest financial benefit of being single and the biggest challenge? Peter went first.
You have total control over your finances. Right?
That is nice.
You're not, you don't, a gambling addict, a shopaholic, an alcoholic, any sort of addict in your life, for example, is kept at arm's distance typically in that sense. And if you're coupled up, it's really a surprising thing for a lot of people that world can be so risky. Here, you get to have control of your finances.
So what's the challenge?
Is that you can't share costs is the main thing. Is like so a couple pays the same amount for a hotel room as I do, even though the value is twice as much for them.
Micah, what about you?
Okay, I would say a benefit is I do what I want when I want.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's pretty great. But because I do what I want when I want, as Peter said, it's very expensive. And I also think being a single person, society imposes a lot of rules on you. So navigating these rules that are not always overt can be very tough.
Andrea?
The same thing. It's like I can do what I want and I can make choices and it only affects me, so I can make smart financial choices looking into the future. I don't have to worry about what somebody else wants to do, good or bad. So that's the benefit for me, and there's nothing really bad that I think, except for travel. I pay for Airbnb instead of splitting it, so that's kind of the downside.
Yeah, and there's those single supplements sometimes when you're traveling. Well, Andrea, let's stick with you. You are a mom of two,
Yes.
happily single by choice, as we can all see by her big grin. For you say that being single led you to economic opportunities. Can you talk about that?
It really did. Well, I wasn't always single. I was married until I wasn't, and I had 2 young children, so I had to make some choices on how I can provide for our future forever and not rely on someone else. So I went to school, and I got my doctorate. And then by having
Congrats on that. We love it for you.
And then by having that, it provided an opportunity to move out of state and follow the dream job I wanted. I didn't have to ask a partner if it was okay, or I can't go because of your job. So it really provided me the freedom to make those moves, to take a different job and make choices for myself and my family.
Micah, how are you sort of navigating the economy being single as a young adult?
Wow, it can be tough. I think I, for a long time, put off a lot of my dreams and a lot of my goals waiting to be partnered up. And so, for instance, I wanted to own a home. That was such a big dream of mine because as a reporter and anchor, we always do stories about Black homeownership being really low. And I'm like, how can I do these stories and not own a home? But I kept telling myself, well, you can't do that on your own, especially in Colorado with these housing prices. And so any goal that I had that I felt was too big, I was placing a hold on it, placing a pause on it. And then finally, one day I was just like, well, let me just see. What does this look like if I were to own a home on my own? And happy to say now I am a homeowner on my own. Which led to other things. Like I thought, I'll probably never be debt-free if I'm not sharing my bills with anybody. And I was able to be debt-free. And so it just led to a lot of amazing things once I finally opened my mind to it. So I'll say this, it's been tough, but I think for a time, I was almost my biggest block. I was my biggest challenge to overcome because I was waiting for this miraculous partnership to come in my life to accomplish these things.
And Micah, I have to say, congratulations on becoming a homeowner. I know it happened a minute ago, but I love hearing about how you got through this mental block and then the financial one.
Well, thank you so much because I honestly didn't know that I could become a homeowner. I didn't know how many resources were out there to help me become a homeowner or debt free, especially as a single person. So, my advice, just look for what's out there. Colorado is great for so many grant opportunities and funding that's available. It's been an absolute dream. You just have to start researching. And I'll say this, just don't give up and don't limit yourself based on your marital status.
There
Don't
you
do
go.
that.
Well, coming up, more nuts and bolts about how to make the single economy work.
This is Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. Welcome back to Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. I'm Denver7's Micah Smith.
And I'm Colorado Public Radio's Nathan Fernando Frescas. Today we're talking about the single life. Black adults are more likely to be single than white or Hispanic people, according to a Pew Research poll. It also found gay, lesbian, and bisexual adults are more likely to be single than straight people.
So we're hearing an event I participated in Denver, which was supported in part by the retirement group AARP. Stacey Alexander is a vice president at AARP and spoke on the stage.
A recent AARP survey asked married and unmarried adults across all ages how they felt about their financial security. In every group, unmarried adults felt less financially secure than married ones. Now, there are a lot of reasons for this, which our research goes into, but a key takeaway is the very real opportunity to help educate and make it possible for single people of all ages to learn about the benefits of financial planning.
All right, so financial planning is definitely something I didn't think about, and it's still something I need to think more about. But now I'm at least in the mindset after participating on this panel. What about you?
I have still to think about that. I am so far behind on financial planning, but just hearing these conversations, how much you need to prepare and prepare early, regardless if you're single or in a married relationship like I am, but how important it is for single people to say, yeah, we need to have these conversations about finances.
Well, Nathan, a financial planner joined us on stage at the theater. Her name is Molly Berger. She's a founder and advisor at Queen City Wealth in Denver. Molly has a lot of single clients, and she got a question. What do those clients ask her advice on?
One of the things driving the rise in the number of older singles is what people are calling gray divorce, sort of older people getting divorced. What kind of impact does that have on someone's financial situation as they age?
It's a big reason I specialize in divorce. I find that there's sort of like all the financial impact of it, because if you think of gray divorce, the assumption is these are older people getting divorced. You probably married a long time, right? You spent the majority of your working years married to somebody. You probably were planning your life and future goals, maybe retirement, like with that person too. So it's kind of suddenly all of that is different, and it's the financial, like figuring out, well, what are my goals as a single person? How does the divorce, like actual settlement, going to impact my goals, right? And then kind of all the emotional part of that. I find a lot of times in divorces, our clients are, I just want out of the divorce so bad, or the marriage so bad, I just want the divorce to go on and be done with, that I don't care, I'll just agree to anything in the settlement, not knowing how much it could hurt you, right, financially. So what assets you're leaving on the table, you don't understand what marital assets are, what you're kind of due, right, from the marital assets. So those are things like we'll try to help people understand. If you were married a long time and maybe you didn't work that whole time, but your spouse was working, saving into their 401k or some other kind of retirement plan, generally you're due part of that retirement plan, right? You were doing the labor of the home and caregiving. So even though it's not in your name, maybe that gets split in the divorce. And if you just kind of throw your hands up and say, I just want out, you're leaving all that right on the table and hurting your own, future retirement situation.
When you're sitting down with some of your single clients that are kind of delving into this world for the first time, what are some of the things that people are often most surprised that they need to be considering when it comes to aging while single?
I think the risk planning, like what are we gonna do? How am I just gonna pay for life if this, if that, right? Like we heard, people live a lot longer. Just in general, women live a lot longer. Most Americans are gonna need some kind of long-term care, like a situation none of us wanna think about or for ourselves, but probably have some kind of experience with, like family members or does anyone you know? How are you gonna cover that cost? And like, the burden is there, right? Who's gonna pay for it? You, an insurance company? Are you just gonna rely on family members? So.
You also got questions from the audience of single people.
I did. I had a lot of questions about kind of how do you navigate the pressures of being single, especially from family and friends. That, forever question, have you found that special someone? How do you date in a financially responsible way? We're definitely in an era where if you're in a heterosexual relationship or you're seeking that, sometimes men will say to women, are you a feminist? Well, if you're a feminist, let's go half and half on the bill. I'm always prepared to pay for my part of the bill. But if you're dating weekly, that starts to add up. So lots of questions like that. I did my very best to answer them to the best of my ability and what works for me.
Yeah.
One of them asked how we can flip the script on the perception of single living and what society can do to catch up to the growing trend. Take a listen.
How do we flip the script, eliminate the stigma? Peter, you want to go first?
Sure. I think we've covered, 3 areas of advocacy tonight. So there's calling your congressperson, right, advocating for family of one policies. There is starting your own business or clamoring for businesses to serve singles. So the previous question is ripe for whether it be AI or personal finance to help single people. And until businesses stop being asleep at the wheel, we're going to continue to have these problems. Our last question, I think, is an important one, is if we're going to change the cultural winds, we need to change the media. And so if you think about like a show like Will and Grace, had a far-reaching effect for the gay and lesbian community. And we need rom-coms that feature single people. We need love songs about something more than this one very tight, specific type of romantic thing. And some of it is, we're gonna need to make it.
I would say the same thing. I think just being transparent with who you are. I'll say when we were in the green room and we were all just kind of chatting and talking about life, I instantly felt just a relief and a connection because there were no expectations. I knew there were no questions coming my way about a relationship, but I was also very open with, like, I'm single right now. I'm dating, but I'm fine. And I think the more that we just talk amongst each other, kind of share who we are openly and honestly, but also make sure that we're not pressing expectations against anybody either, I think that we'll start to slowly see the narrative change.
Well, thanks for sharing this single space with me. This event was recorded at the Holiday Theater in Denver, hosted by the public radio program Marketplace.
And that's this week's episode of Real Talk with Denver7 and CPR News. Every week, we have a real talk on issues that impact Coloradans who are often overlooked.
You can find all of our shows on denver7.com/realtalk or at cpr.org/realtalk. Have a great day.